Two roommates spent years drunkenly screaming at each other with no clue that strangers all across America were listening to every word. In the late 1980s, one bright pink apartment building in San Francisco known as the Pepto-Bismol Palace was home to some truly chaotic characters, the loudest of them being two old bickering roommates, Peter, a gay man, and Ray, a homophobe. They would rage at each other all throughout the night, sometimes escalating into full fistfights that echoed throughout the entire building. The violent antics of this odd couple would have been contained within the Pepto-Bismol Palace and then eventually lost in time had it not been for the recent college grads living next door who were sneaking a microphone in through their window and secretly recording them every night. These two became obsessed with their crazy neighbors and documented around 14 hours of Peter and Ray shouting matches, which included so many one-liners, so perfect they'd make the best comedy writers jealous.
Shut up, little man. You always giggle falsely. You don't have a decent giggle in you.
I am a decent.
Shut up, little man.
The recordings started getting copied onto cassettes and then passed around between friends and then friends of friends, and then they started selling them. Before long, these two miserable alcoholics became underground cult celebrities. People began making art inspired by the recordings, sampling the arguments into songs, transforming the audio into comic strips, producing full stage plays. Meanwhile, another fight was brewing between producers trying to be the first to get the rights to a Peter and Ray movie. But to make that movie, they'd need the one thing the original tape collectors never got from Peter and Ray: permission. The documentary Shut Up Little Man, An Audio Misadventure follows how these bootleg cassette tapes, which were born out of an invasion of privacy and some light stalking, spiraled completely out of control. This story is so interesting to learn about retroactively because Peter and Ray were some of the first strangers recorded at their worst and unwillingly turned into content for the masses, which is now one of the most popular genres 30 years later. Hi, I'm Joey, and this is a video all about movies that did some law breaking in order to be made. Yes, I'm doing the intro after the first story in the video. Wow. Guess you could call me a real rule breaker. But not all rules are created equal. I'm not gonna go to prison for the rule that I just broke, but some of these filmmakers might. In fact, the next one definitely did. Let's continue. My guy here might be the most unlucky person in movie history. Robert Goldstein had originally supplied costumes to Hollywood productions, including D.W. Griffith's notorious The Birth of a Nation, which inspired him to make a movie of his own. He wanted to do for the Revolutionary War what Griffith had done for the Civil War. The result became his self-funded 1917 silent film, The Spirit of 76. His pro-America flick would have been no problem had it not been for the fact that it featured a few scenes with British soldiers committing war atrocities against American settlers. And this would have been no problem if America hadn't just entered World War I 1 month earlier with Britain as one of its closest allies. Goldstein was ordered to remove the anti-British scenes, and he obliged. But somehow, when The Spirit of 76 had its LA premiere a while later, those pesky anti-British scenes found themselves back in the dang movie. Historians aren't even sure it was Goldstein who put those scenes back in, because by that point, he'd already lost financial control of the production company. But Goldstein was the one to take the fall, and the judge proceeding over his trial really had it out for him and believed he was a German spy. Which sounds a bit dramatic for a costume shop owner turned filmmaker, but it didn't help that one lead actress in The Spirit of 76 testified that Goldstein joked during production that if America goes to war against Germany, he'd totally be a German spy. Dude buried himself under a mile of dirt, and with that final nail in his coffin, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison under the Espionage Act, with the government claiming Goldstein was trying to undermine American troops by turning them against their British allies. When he was released after 3 years, he supposedly had someone contact the newly developed Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, asking on Goldstein's behalf for their help to get him back in the industry. But today, it's believed Goldstein wrote the letter himself under a fake identity, and it didn't work anyway. So now, unable to rebuild his career in Hollywood, Goldstein was rumored to have drifted across Europe in the 1930s, looking for somewhere that would let him stay, eventually landing in Germany. Nobody really knows exactly where Goldstein's story goes from here. Some records suggest he made it back to the States, only to be committed to a mental hospital. Others believe he never made it out of Germany in the first place, with this Slate article from 2000 concluding that Goldstein almost certainly died in the Holocaust. And the movie he made that caused it all is now considered totally lost. Keanu Reeves got tricked by his own friend into starring in this movie. Before being one of the biggest stars on earth, Keanu Reeves had been friends with Joe Charbonnick for nearly a decade. A friendship that started with street hockey, then Charbonnick became a roadie for Keanu's band Dogstar, eventually directing some of their music videos too. So when Joe showed Keanu a script he wrote for what would become The Watcher, Reeves agreed to do his buddy a favor and play a small role that was only supposed to take a few days to shoot. Then The Matrix happened, and now Keanu's box office allure cranked up to 11, and with his name attached to The Watcher, the studio was able to raise more money and attract more star power. Then right before production on The Watcher started, the script was rewritten to give Reeves a way bigger role as the main villain, which he did not sign off on. That wasn't the only thing he didn't sign off on. At this point, Reeves just wanted out, but he learned he couldn't bail because his friend, who he was doing all of this for as a favor, had forged Reeves' signature on the contract. If he quit the movie, the studio could sue him for breach of contract, then he'd have to sue his former friend for forgery, then spend years fighting both cases out in court. Or he could go the other route. He could just be chill-ass Keanu Reeves, do the movie, and move on with his life. The studio made a deal with Reeves that they'd limit his name and likeness in the marketing if he agreed not to publicly trash the movie for 1 year after its release. The Watcher premiered in 2000, and critics hated it, and especially hated Reeves' performance as a serial killer. He was even nominated for Worst Supporting Actor at the Razzies, and poor guy had to sit there in silence while everyone roasted him for a movie role he got tricked into doing. A year later, when he was finally allowed to share with the world what happened, the story didn't get much traction because it was published on a day with more eventful things going on. Charbonnick only made one other movie after this, which has 19 views on Letterboxd, mind you. So I would say this was a bad career move for Joe, and he also lost a cool friend in Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves still seems traumatized by The Watcher decades later, because during this interview he did while promoting John Wick, the interviewer says, "You haven't done a horror movie since The Gift." Keanu says, "Yeah, that was a horror of a different sort." "What? Why?" "Oh, it was a disaster. I hate that movie. It's terrible. It's a disaster." "No, it's great. Your scene with Giovanni Ribisi." "Oh, The Gift. I was thinking The Watcher." "Oh, The Gift is fantastic." The greatest stunt of the entire Fast and Furious franchise may have happened off camera. Director Justin Lin wanted the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift to be as authentic as possible, which meant actually filming in the streets of Tokyo. The problem was that Japan has so much red tape around filming permits. So to actually make that happen, production had to pull a move straight out of their own movies. The secret mission was to film in Shibuya, one of the busiest pedestrian crossings on Earth, with undercover camera operators scattered throughout the area to capture footage so that authorities wouldn't notice. And then authorities noticed. Police showed up, shut the production down, and demanded to know who the director was because somebody's going to jail for this. Justin Lin was ready to surrender when a man he didn't even know suddenly stepped forward and said, "Take me away, officers. I'm the director." Turns out this man was hired by the studio as a decoy director specifically to take the fall when production would inevitably get in trouble with Tokyo's police. This movie martyr was thrown in jail for the night, but by then Lin had actually gotten enough footage to finish the rest of the scene back in Los Angeles. Although Tokyo Drift was the lowest grossing movie in the franchise, the studio still saw enough from Lin to hand him the keys to 4 future Fast and Furious installments. Harry Potter fans who don't want to support J.K. Rowling anymore, but still want to experience the magic of the wizarding world, I have a special illegal treat for you. While at a bar one night, comic book artist Brad Neely and his friends were transfixed by a mysterious billiards player donning a hoodie over his hat, sunglasses under that, and headphones on the outside of all of it. The group consensus was that he must be listening to Harry Potter on audiobook, which Brad began to jokingly narrate. It had the group laughing so hard that he decided to actually make something out of this bit. 2 weeks later, Brad had completed an 18,000-word unauthorized audio track called Wizard People, Dear Reader, meant to be synced up with the first Harry Potter movie played on mute. The narration gets all the movie characters' names wrong. Voldemort is now Valmart, Hagrid is now Hagar, Snape is Snake or just Hideous Woman, and those will now be their names for the rest of my life. And yet he puts his all into each and every sentence.
They railroad her into the bleachers, and down she goes. "Fucking shit," says Harry. He is all but hulking out at this point.
Brad's erratic writing is extremely descriptive and just accurate enough that I could be blindfolded and still know exactly what's going on.
Well, bless my nippers, cries Harry. Bless them all day long. He stands in awe of the smoking engine.
The production is so juvenile, with word flubs, lip smacks, pages turning, and moments when Brad is clearly out of breath. But then I would be like, wait, what he just said was actually fucking poetry.
Her voice is chilling and like a piano made of frozen Windex.
Wizard People did the rounds through Brad's friend group, then the New York Underground Film Festival got a hold of it and played it, which led to the New York Times writing a piece on it, which led to independent theaters all around the nation asking Neely to come perform it live. Brad said these theaters would rent a copy of The Sorcerer's Stone and run it with the sound off, and I'd sit down at the front of the theater with a reading light and a six-pack. I wish he could have done this for the whole Harry Potter series, but the magic was extinguished when Warner Brothers caught wind of this live tour and told the indie theaters that if they didn't cancel their upcoming shows, they would never get to screen another Warner Brothers picture ever again. So the tour was cut short without breaking even, but Neely himself was never contacted by the studio, likely because in a perfect full circle joke from the universe, they misspelled his name as Healy. Wizard People now lives on through a YouTube playlist, which has managed to stay online for over 19 years. So here's a gift from the past, delivered by Hedwig, the post office bird. The hardest part of making this movie was convincing the government they weren't making this movie. Oliver Schmitz knew this wasn't going to be easy to pull off. During the most oppressive years of apartheid, South Africa heavily censored its film industry. You couldn't even get permission to shoot a movie unless your script was approved by the government first. Mapantsula from 1988 is a deconstruction of the apartheid system through the eyes of a petty criminal in Johannesburg named Panic. It's a movie with incredible performances, specifically the lead actor who co-wrote the movie, as well as beautiful music and a deeply anti-apartheid message. But how do you make an anti-apartheid movie while filming right under the apartheid government's nose? You hide in plain sight. To get permission to film, they submitted a fake script to the censorship board. To film the more political scenes, they shot in discreet locations. When law enforcement would come around asking what they were filming, the actors would lie and say, "It's for an anti-communist movie, you're gonna love it." Towards the end of production, according to Schmitz, someone at the film lab figured out what kind of movie this was going to be and deliberately damaged some of the materials. After that, police started getting more nosy, which convinced the filmmakers to smuggle the film negatives out of the country to finish post-production in London. When they returned with the completed film and the censorship board finally saw the real movie, they demanded that the political scenes be cut, which Oliver Schmitz refused. So the movie was banned in South Africa, which Oliver Schmitz also refused. He called an audible and decided if they had to make the movie illegally, they might as well distribute it illegally too. So the filmmakers asked people to pirate their own film, make VHS copies, and pass them along. The VHS rip was low quality, it had the wrong aspect ratio, and the filmmakers never made a penny off of it, but this kept the movie alive and gave it legendary status as, quote, the first true anti-apartheid feature film by, for, and about Black South Africans. In 2023, Schmitz was able to get a 4K restoration of the movie done, which is now available to watch for free with a library card on Canopy, giving this project the closure it deserved after 35 years. This new version opens with, quote, "It's a miracle this film was made. It's a miracle this film survived." An entire movie was secretly filmed inside Disney World without permission. 2013's Escape from Tomorrow follows a guy who has just lost his job, suffering through a vacation to Disney World with his family. By pretending to be regular tourists, they managed to film 11 days in Florida's Disney World and 2 weeks in California's Disneyland, only ever getting stopped by security once on the last day of filming. Security asked if they were famous because the cast was being followed by cameramen who they thought were paparazzi. They would make their escape through a parade that had just started. So production was over, but the Disney paranoia was just beginning. The filmmakers chose to do post-production in South Korea and made over 10 copies of the footage in fear that Disney would somehow raid their apartment and seize the movie. After Escape from Tomorrow had its premiere at Sundance, it became the talk of the festival because after that first screening, critics ran around telling everyone to go see this movie before Disney erases it from existence and sues the filmmakers into oblivion, which never ended up happening. happening, and here's my harsh take as to why. Disney probably would have tried to suppress this movie if it were good. It was saved by its own mediocrity. Take away the novelty of this was illegally filmed inside Disney, and this is just a story about a dad who hates his life, hates his family, and loves stalking teenage girls with braces. The more elaborate sequences were shot on sound stages away from Disney, and what's left is just people standing in long lines, arguing, barfing, pooping, stubbing their toes, slapping their children, getting tased in the nuts. So, a normal day at the park. This movie is nothing but pain, and its only real question is, what if you went on vacation with the worst people you've ever met? Disney probably decided there's no reason to burn these filmmakers at the stake. The audience and critics will do that for them. Any legal action would just encourage more filmmakers to use their parks as movie sets without permission, because this wasn't even the first movie to do that, and it wouldn't be the last. Blonde Death did it in 1984. A found footage short did it in 2012. A few years later, the Florida Project did it. One of my film professors from UCF made a movie about the cryogenically frozen head of Walt Disney exploring present-day Magic Kingdom, and also successfully filmed there without permission. 13 years later, there is still no escaping Escape from Tomorrow, because a sequel just premiered at the Florida Film Festival, although this follow-up was not filmed in Disney. One man tried to conquer this territory through sheer horniness. There's a long, controversial history between Great Britain and Argentina over who the Falkland Islands actually belong to. In 1982, the two countries fought a war over the territory. Argentina surrendered 10 weeks later, and because things remained tense, Argentine passport holders were not allowed to go to the Falkland Islands. When this ban was lifted in 1999, it only took 2 months for these guys to fly out there and cause a ruckus with their docu-fiction feature film, Fuckland. It's the story of a man with a plan. Since the Argentine military couldn't finish the job in 1982, this magician decided he'd invade the Falklands himself. He'll impregnate all the women to pass on his Argentine genes, and those babies will overrun the islands and declare their loyalty to Argentina. Fuckland is the video diary of this sexual deviant, and while the lead actor is playing a fake character, everyone he encounters is a real person unknowingly being filmed on hidden camera for a movie being illegally produced on foreign land. Besides him, there's only one other actress, and even she was unaware of the main character's true motivations. The lead actor described the project as the Truman Show backwards. I know everything, they know nothing. Even the local government knew nothing, and they said afterwards that if they were aware of this production, they would have shut it down immediately and discussed whether this constituted unauthorized activity on sovereign British land. The filmmakers defended themselves by pointing to British law at the time, allowing filming in public places, and said, hey, after all, that's the law islanders chose to live under. Safe to say, Fuckland did not win over any of the locals. In 2013, those locals voted on whether to remain a British overseas territory. The results are in. 99.8% voted yes. How does a weird doll movie become one of the most controversial biopics ever made? Flashback to the 1970s, siblings Richard and Karen Carpenter were one of the best-selling musical acts around. But on top of the world, they each struggled with the media attention and relentless pressure of stardom. Richard Carpenter battled drug addiction, and Karen battled anorexia. In 1983, Karen Carpenter passed away from complications related to the eating disorder at just 32 years old. A few years later, a young film student named Todd Haynes decided to tell Karen's story in a pretty unorthodox way. Instead of casting actors, he used Barbie dolls to make Superstar, the Karen Carpenter story, and it's way better than it has any right to be. It sounds like this should be a funny gimmick, but the movie is haunting and way more educational than I expected. Using Barbie dolls, which represent an impossible beauty standard, to tell the story of someone destroyed by impossible beauty standards is such a brilliant creative move. And the performances he's getting out of these toys is crazy. As Karen's health worsens over the course of the movie, Haynes even physically carves away pieces of the doll itself until the plastic body becomes disturbingly thin. Superstar started building buzz in film festivals until Haynes was approached by a line of lawyers. First in line was Mattel, the maker of Barbie dolls, and they were ready to sue. But Haynes was able to prove that all the dolls he used in the film were actually off-brand Barbie knockoffs, so Mattel didn't pursue any legal action. Next up, coming in hot, was Richard Carpenter, who hated the film's portrayal of him and his family and sued over unauthorized use of Carpenter's music. He'd win in court, making Superstar illegal to distribute. Richard would approve of a different made-for-TV biopic only a couple years later, Carpenter, which the lead human actress said was an unnerving experience for her because of Richard's involvement and insistence that she drop weight to wear Karen's actual clothes. Richard would later say participating in this movie was one of his biggest mistakes, and even during production, Richard was spotted on his knees praying to Karen for her forgiveness. And despite never getting an official release, Superstar has achieved cult status through VHS rips that constantly pop up on YouTube, with Entertainment Weekly ranking it in their top 50 cult movies list. And Todd Haynes has gone on to become one of America's most respected filmmakers. So if you ask me, Richard Carpenter won the battle, but the movie won the war. The government tried to erase this documentary from existence. In the spring of 1966, Frederick Wiseman spent 29 days inside Bridgewater State Hospital for the criminally insane, documenting the horrifying conditions and treatment of its patients. This footage became the documentary Titicut Follies, which features no interviews, no narrations, no reenactments, and no music, nothing but the pure observations of a camera looking straight into man-made hell. Patients spending most of their days locked inside an empty cell without clothes, the loneliest moments coming while they're allowed outside with others, the cruelest moments coming while in the hands of their doctors, the strangest moments coming when you can't differentiate between guards and inmates as they all share the stage for the hospital's annual variety show, put on by the head of the asylum, a thespian stuck in a superintendent suit. I was surprised to learn that when Wiseman screened the movie for the superintendent, he actually liked it and hoped the documentary would expose how awful conditions were and pressure the state into funding improvements. The superintendent even helped the filmmaker move through all the legal red tape to film there in the first place, which took about a year and a half. But the state of Massachusetts wasn't as pleased with Titicut Follies. They cared less about the conditions inside the hospital and more about the movie embarrassing them. Under the excuse of patient privacy, the court banned the movie and ordered all film negatives to be destroyed. For over 20 years, Wiseman's documentary was illegal to watch unless you were a healthcare professional, a lawyer, judge, or a student in one of those fields. And even then, the screenings had to be approved with advance notice to the Attorney General's office, rendering the movie basically impossible to view. Wiseman reopened the case in 1987 after 5 men died at Bridgewater due to negligence, and it'd take another 3 years for the courts to reverse their stance, which they did only after the judge on the original case passed away. The new judge decided that the film was protected by the First Amendment, and it aired for the first time to the American public on PBS 23 years later in 1992. But behind closed doors, do we take any better care of those in correctional facilities now compared to in 1967? There's one modern companion piece called The Alabama Solution, which was released in 2025, and it was created from videos taken by inmates inside Alabama prisons with contraband cell phones. This footage could be considered illegally captured too, and definitely hard to watch, but I think you should see both of these documentaries. Titicut Follies is free on Canopy with your library card, and The Alabama Solution is on HBO Max. The actors in this movie had no idea they were breaking the law until the cameras started rolling. 10 Meters follows a university student who gets an explosive strapped to his body by a vengeful classmate and has to stay at least 10 meters away from him or it goes off. Listening to the cast and crew talk about this production, everyone sounds so relieved that nobody was arrested or killed. The director had an incredible talent for getting people to do things they did not realize they were signing up for, such as sprinting like a lunatic through crowded streets with a fake explosive on your chest. When the lead actor read that he would be running through a shopping center, he assumed the authorities would be aware, the proper permits would be in place, maybe the area would be roped off from pedestrians. The director let him know only moments before filming the scene this is all totally illegal and they were going to actually have to make a run for it. After the take, he was told to do it again. Anytime authorities showed up, they would just claim they were making a student film so they'd be taken less seriously. And it worked. During a shootout scene at the lead actress's home, police arrived after neighbors called about a disturbance. They entered the house, which was littered with prop guns and fake drugs, and the officers ended up staying to watch them film the rest of the scene, which included dialogue like, "Oh my God, you just shot a cop," shouted at full volume, which made the crew worried that those same neighbors who originally called the cops would call again for backup. The credits of this movie give a special thanks to literally anyone who hasn't sued us. This filmmaker was criminally charged because authorities didn't like what her camera saw. After filming more than 20 documentaries and having her photography published by outlets like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, Umida Akhmadova was considered the most famous woman with a camera in Central Asia. Her work focused on ordinary life in Uzbekistan, and the government had a problem with that. They were especially bothered by two projects she released in 2009. The first being a photo series titled Women and Men from Dawn to Dusk, and then a documentary, The Burden of Virginity. The candid photos showcase people in rural Uzbekistan just existing, and it couldn't be more tame. And the documentary was a discussion on Uzbek wedding traditions surrounding a woman's virginity. In some communities, it's expected of the newlyweds to have a blood-stained bedsheet publicly displayed after their wedding night as proof that the bride was a virgin. A mother speaks in the film about how her daughter considered taking her own life because after her wedding, her bedsheet didn't show any blood and she was subjected to a medical examination. These projects were considered so insulting and slanderous against Uzbek people that Akhmadova faced up to 6 months in prison or 2 years in a labor camp. The prosecution's arguments are just baffling because they aren't accusing Akhmadova of fabricating anything. Their case was that her projects were unflattering depictions of Uzbek village life and excludes the beautiful landscape of their homeland. Imagine being thrown in prison because you made a movie and didn't show enough trees. Local artists rallied behind her and set up an online petition, but she didn't have universal support. Look no further than the comment section of the YouTube uploads of the film, where users curse her and her family for sharing these stories. The court did convict her of offense through mass media, but in a super weird move, immediately granted her amnesty in honor of the anniversary of Uzbekistan's independence. Since then, Umida Akhmadova has been excluded from official expeditions in her country, but she has had her work featured in international exhibits as recently as 2023. Before Kim Jong-il became supreme leader of North Korea, he was the country's head of propaganda and a major movie buff. In fact, he was the country's only movie buff, mostly because, unlike North Korean citizens, he was actually allowed to watch foreign films. And watching the movies coming out of South Korea really pissed him off because, in comparison, North Korean cinema was a complete joke. Kim's envious eyes lasered in on two people, Shin Se-ok, the biggest director in South Korea, and his ex-wife Chae Eun-hee, the country's most beloved actress. He was so jealous that Shin and Chae were making these great movies for South Korea, and he decided if he can't beat them, kidnap him. Chae was abducted first, and despite being divorced for years by now, Shin went searching for her and he got kidnapped too. While imprisoned separately, Shin made multiple escape attempts, which landed him in a brutal prison camp where he stayed for years. The whole time, neither was sure if the other was even still alive, until one night at Kim Jong-il's birthday party. Kim reunited them, had them remarry, and announced they would now be making movies for North Korea. The two captive artists realized the only way to survive and maybe someday escape was to play along, so they got to work. Over the next few years, they made 7 films for the regime, introducing North Korean audiences to things they'd never seen before, like foreign filming locations and the nation's first on-screen kiss. They completely raised the bar for North Korean cinema, and some of their films even won awards at international film festivals. They would accept these awards in person while forced to say publicly that they had willingly defected to North Korea. Kim Jong-il's plan was working, and the happier he was, the more freedom they got. Their biggest hit in North Korea was Pulgasari, a Godzilla ripoff about a toy made of rice that comes alive, grows to colossal sizes by eating weapons, and defends a village of farmers from a cruel dictator. It's ridiculous, but when you watch it with the understanding that behind the camera, the filmmakers are working basically with a loaded gun to their head, it actually feels miraculous. But this would be their last movie for Kim Jong-il. By now, he was fully convinced of their loyalty, and in 1986, they were allowed to travel to Vienna for work on their next production. Once there, they evaded their handlers, made a break for the US Embassy, and escaped after almost a decade in captivity. They had their freedom, but back in South Korea, many still believed that they had defected under their own power. And in America, neither were really able to rebuild their careers. Chae acted in one stage play before retiring, and Shin's final directing credit was for a sequel of Three Ninjas. As Paul Fisher writes in a Kim Jong-il production, the two were famous together, rich together, poor together, made films together, were married, divorced, remarried, kidnapped, imprisoned, and escaped together. This director went to prison after becoming convinced his own producer was sabotaging their movie. John McTiernan was the filmmaker behind Die Hard and The Hunt for Red October, who many credit as the creator of the modern action movie. Then in 2002, his newest film was hitting the silver screen, a remake of the 1975 sci-fi flick Rollerball. And this ball rolled right off the cliff. There were way too many cooks in the kitchen, and everybody wanted to cook something different. Producers wanted a smart, dystopian thriller with social commentary. McTiernan wanted an R-rated, nudity and blood-filled, action-packed movie, and test screening audiences just wanted to go home. These clashing visions for Rollerball ate away at McTiernan so much that he actually thought one of his producers, Charles Roven, was ruining the movie on purpose. So what do you do when you think someone is sabotaging your project? You hire a private investigator to wiretap his phone, of course. And not just any private investigator. He hired Anthony Pellicano, the infamous Hollywood fixer known for allegedly running a celebrity espionage ring. When Pellicano's operation collapsed in 2006, investigators uncovered wiretapping, racketeering, witness tampering, and computer fraud, among other things. Vanity Fair wrote that this scandal was about to bring down some of the town's top names and believed that nothing in Hollywood will ever be the same. Instead, beyond Pellicano himself getting 15 years in prison, the biggest Hollywood figure who actually faced any consequences over any of it was rollerballer John McTiernan. Because when an FBI agent called him up and asked if he had hired Pellicano to wiretap Roven, McTiernan said no. Problem was, he totally did, which is illegal, and lying to an FBI agent is illegal squared. What followed was years of legal battles, with McTiernan pleading guilty, withdrawing that plea, then pleading guilty again, until ultimately he was sentenced to 1 year in prison in 2010. McTiernan's team felt like he was the fall guy for all of Hollywood, and they said they knew exactly why. They claimed that the FBI agent who originally got that false statement out of him had a vendetta against McTiernan because before he joined the FBI, he was an actor who auditioned for roles in Die Hard and The Hunt for Red October and didn't get the parts. That agent said McTiernan's claims were 100% bullshit and that he may have to sue. Regardless of who you believe, there's no way around the fact that one of the greatest action directors ever went to prison over Rollerball. This illegal movie had to be smuggled out of the country. For any filmmaker, getting banned by the government from making movies would end your career. Any filmmaker except Jafar Panahi. Jafar Panahi had been one of Iran's most celebrated filmmakers since the 1990s. But after documenting protests following Iran's disputed 2009 election, the government placed him under house arrest and banned him from making movies for 20 years, as a lengthy prison sentence also hung over his head. Unfortunately for them, Panahi is physically incapable of not making movies. For the first couple years of his exile, he tried to suppress his cinematic urges by spending his days taking pictures of clouds from his apartment window. Until one day, he invited a filmmaker friend over, pressed record, and started documenting his life under house arrest. But don't worry, the government said he couldn't make films, and this is not a film. I mean, this is a film titled This Is Not a Film. Here's a guy facing years in prison, while outside his home, gunshots and explosions ring through the streets, and he's still got filmmaking on the mind. This Is Not a Film was then smuggled out of the country on a USB, submitted to the Cannes Film Festival, and viewed as one of the best documentaries of 2011. And Panahi was just getting started. He'd continue making films where he could in secret. His next film was shot entirely in his home, followed by another shot in his car, then in the countryside, then in the desert. Then 10 years later, citing the original convictions against him, he was thrown in prison after he went to inquire about the arrest of another filmmaker. He spent months behind bars before being released following a hunger strike. And what did he do after he was free? He took a much needed vacation. Just kidding. He made another movie. Using his time in prison as inspiration, he secretly made another film, It Was Just an Accident, which went on to win the top prize at Cannes. Other movies in this video broke the law due to what they were filming. Jafar Panahi's films broke the law due to who was filming. Almost every movie Panahi has made has been an unbelievably brave act of rebellion. Because as he says, if cinema is really what is sacred for you, then no regime, no censorship, no authoritarian system can stop you. This Oscar-winning documentary forced the filmmakers to register as foreign agents. Terry Nash was still a student when she attended a lecture by anti-nuclear activist Dr. Helen Caldicott about the medical and societal consequences of nuclear war. Nash had never made a film, but knew this subject and this speaker was something she had to cover. In 1982, she produced the documentary short, If You Love This Planet. Nash builds the film around Caldicott's lecture, intercutting it with vintage US propaganda films that cheerfully sold the atomic bomb like it was the newest kitchen appliance. The all-new atomic bomb brought to you with over 3,500 yards of total destruction. Seconds later, we're looking at children covered in horrific burns after Hiroshima. It packs a powerful message for nuclear disarmament in a short 25 minutes, and it was coming at no better time. The Cold War was still raging, and nuclear annihilation felt like a real possibility. And it was a really nice touch to include footage from an old war movie starring Ronald Reagan before he became the guy who would decide how America would respond to this very documentary. And now the improbable happened. It was nominated for an Oscar. Shortly after this huge news, the unthinkable happened. Her Oscar-nominated film was declared foreign political propaganda under federal law by President Reagan's Justice Department. Now the filmmakers and anyone who distributed the film had to register as foreign agents to the FBI. But this government censorship accidentally turned this tiny documentary into the lovable bad boy of award season and led to more media attention than it had before. Then the extraordinary happened. It won. When Nash got to the mic to accept the award, these were her first words.
Well, you really know how to show a foreign agent a good time. For their tremendous effort in promoting If You Love This Planet, I'd like to thank the U.S. Department of Justice.
4 years later, the case against this doc climbed up to the US Supreme Court, who ruled in favor of the Justice Department. It was decided that If You Love This Planet would retain its status as political propaganda. Technically speaking, sharing this documentary would require registering as a foreign agent. And now I'm no foreign agent, so I'm gonna pass the mic to someone off screen. The following statement isn't coming from me. If you wanna watch If You Love This Planet in its entirety, I've heard it's free on YouTube. An entire film festival was canceled because of this controversial movie. This is Sweetback's Baadasssss song from 1971. That's badass with 3 A's and 5 S's. But there's not much that's sweet about this movie. It was written, directed by, and starred Melvin Van Peebles as Sweetback, a man on the run after defending another black man from 2 violent police officers. The first scene hits us with on-screen sexual abuse of a child, which the filmmaker cast his own son for, and the last scene of the movie shows the real dead bodies of a couple dogs. And everything in between these scenes is pretty wild shit, like when Sweetback accidentally seeks refuge in a building that belongs to the Hells Angels and is challenged to a duel with their female leader. His battle of choice? Lovemaking. And in lovemaking, he always wins. The movie is pretty wild. The making of it was even wilder. In that lovemaking duel scene, they hired real members of the Hells Angels. When one of them wanted to leave early and was told they couldn't, the biker pulled out a knife. Van Peebles then apparently snapped his fingers and his crew walked in with rifles. The biker decided he could stay. They couldn't afford a stunt double, so Melvin Van Peebles did his own stunts, including the unsimulated sex scenes, which led to him contracting gonorrhea. He used that to apply for workers' comp and used the payouts from that to buy more film stock, and he got right back in there. And the movie became a hit. Many credit Sweetback's Baadasssss song with launching the blaxploitation movement. At first, Sweetback's Baadasssss song only played in 2 theaters, but eventually it expanded and made over $15 million in the box office, which was a lot considering it was self-funded with a little $50,000 loan from Bill Cosby, and also considering it received an X rating. Van Peebles used that to help market the film with the tagline, "Rated X by an all-white jury." But overseas, the film ruffled a lot of feathers. It was scheduled to screen at a film festival in South Australia, but before even seeing the film, the state's attorney general banned it because of indecency and violence. This decision led 3 of the festival's board members to resign, and the festival itself ended up being canceled altogether, not being revived until 32 years later in 2003. But MVP was always aware that Sweetback was going to be controversial. In an interview, it was brought up how the sexual images, violence, and portrayal of women were all going to piss people off, and he just responds with,
duh.
There would later be another film about the making of the original film, directed by and starring Melvin's son from the opening scene, Mario Van Peebles. Imagine making a movie so risky that nobody puts their name in the credits. Made on a budget of just $15,000 by filmmakers with no formal training, Stories of Our Lives is an anthology film telling 5 stories about queer life in Kenya and what love feels like when society tells you your existence is illegal. The film was created by the Nest Collective, who traveled around Kenya meeting queer people willing to anonymously share their experiences living under laws criminalizing homosexuality. And it's hard to overstate just how brave that was. In Kenya, your sexuality could affect your ability to marry, adopt children, gather publicly, even get healthcare or hold a job. Because of those risks, the movie originally listed no individual credits at all to protect everyone involved with the project. So when 3 of the filmmakers revealed their identities during its premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival, the big question became, are you going to be able to go home? Their answer was basically, we don't know, but Kenya is our home and we want to go back. And when they did, they suffered consequences. Kenya's Department of Film Services placed an immediate ban on the movie for promoting homosexuality and placed one of the filmmakers under arrest for shooting the film without a license. Suddenly, the central conflict of the film itself became their real life. Do you run away or do you stay and fight? In a TED Talk, one of the directors spoke about what he called the rampant predatory Christianity spreading across Kenya and how it is the job of the artist to push back. Their choice to stay in Kenya and make more art lies in their belief that when art is created there, the culture slowly shifts and people find a voice in the work. The charges against the arrested filmmaker were eventually dropped, but Stories of Our Lives remains banned in Kenya to this day, meaning the filmmakers legally cannot share the finished movie with the same people who trusted them enough to share their stories in the first place. The link to rent or buy Stories of Our Lives will be in the description, with all proceeds benefiting the Nest Collective. If there's a movie I didn't cover in this video, it might be because I covered it in a past video. I'll put a list of any of those in the description with timestamps if you want to see them. I also just found out that I have a summons to appear in court for the crime of placing my intro too far into my video. While I deal with that, if you want to see more from me, check out my last video where we cover reality game shows that should not exist. I'll see you in the other video. Let's do this again sometime.